The young woman had always loved music, though she rarely told anyone about it. She lived in a small town where everyone knew each other, and most people thought of her as quiet, almost invisible. She spent her days working at a local bakery, kneading dough and arranging pastries, but in the evenings, her true passion came alive. She would sit by the piano in her tiny apartment, running her fingers over the keys, feeling the vibrations in her fingertips, and letting the music flow through her. No one ever heard her play. It was her secret world, a place where nothing else mattered. One morning, while walking past the town hall, she noticed a poster for a community talent show. The bright letters caught her eye, and for a moment, her heart raced. She had never performed in front of anyone except her cat, and even then, she often played quietly, afraid of being judged. The thought of standing on a stage in front of strangers made her stomach twist. People would laugh. They would think she was foolish. But something inside her stirred. She felt a sudden, strange excitement. Maybe it was time to let her music be heard. For the next few days, she thought about it constantly. She imagined herself standing on that stage, her fingers hovering over the piano keys, and the music filling the room. She imagined the audience, some curious, some skeptical, some even amused. She tried to convince herself not to do it, but each time she sat by her piano, the same thought returned. She had to try. She had to give herself a chance, even if it was terrifying. The night before the talent show, she hardly slept. Her mind was filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She went over the songs she might play, trying to pick one that would showcase her ability without being too complicated. She practiced each piece over and over, sometimes stopping to wipe her hands on her apron as if that would calm her nerves. She knew she wasn't a professional musician. She knew there would be people in the audience who were much more talented, but she also knew that she couldn't let fear stop her anymore. On the morning of the talent show, the town hall buzzed with activity. Contestants moved about, adjusting costumes, tuning instruments, and practicing one last time. She stood outside the hall for a moment, taking a deep breath and feeling her hands shake. She felt small among the crowd of confident performers, some of whom had clearly done this many times before. People were talking, laughing, and she wondered if anyone even noticed her. She felt the familiar knot of doubt tighten in her chest. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe she wasn't ready. But then she remembered her evenings at the piano, the way the music had made her feel alive, and she pushed forward, stepping into the hall. As she entered, a few people glanced at her and smiled politely, but most were already focused on the performers or talking among themselves. She found her way to the piano at the center of the stage and sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys. The bright stage lights made her squint, and she felt the weight of every eye in the room on her. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. For a moment she froze, questioning why she had come. She could hear a few whispers from the audience, some curious, some clearly mocking. She heard one person chuckle. Her stomach sank, and she almost got up to leave. But then she remembered why she was here. This was her music, her moment, and she refused to let anyone's laughter take it away. She closed her eyes for a brief second and let her hands rest on the keys. She felt the cool surface under her fingertips, the familiar texture that had been her companion through countless evenings of private practice. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her chest, and then began to play. The first notes were tentative, almost hesitant, as if she were testing the waters. She could hear a few more chuckles from the crowd, and she felt a flicker of fear, but she didn't stop. She reminded herself that no one had to like her music, but she had to play it for herself. Gradually, her confidence grew with each passing measure. The notes became stronger, more fluid, and her hands moved with a rhythm that surprised even her. The whispers in the audience quieted as people began to notice the change. She was no longer just a shy girl at the piano. She was a musician telling a story through sound. She poured her heart into the music, letting every emotion she had kept hidden in her daily life spill into the melody. She thought of the lonely evenings when only the music had kept her company, of the dreams she had tucked away, and of the courage it had taken to sit in this spotlight. As she continued to play, She noticed a few people leaning forward, their expressions changing from doubt to curiosity. She saw a child with wide eyes, mesmerized by the sound, and an older woman tapping her foot in time with the rhythm. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago faded, replaced by quiet attention. She could feel the shift in energy, the way the music was connecting her to the audience, bridging the gap between her fears and their curiosity. It was as if, for a brief moment, they were all experiencing the music together, sharing something unspoken but deeply felt. By the time she reached the end of her piece, she was breathless, not just from the music but from the intensity of the moment. She lifted her hands from the keys and looked up, expecting polite applause or perhaps a few more whispers. Instead, the room erupted into cheers and clapping. Faces that had been skeptical were now smiling, some even standing to show their appreciation. Her heart swelled with relief and joy, and for the first time, she felt truly seen. She realized that the laughter she had feared didn't matter, that what mattered was her courage to try and the honesty of her music. After stepping off the stage, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. People came up to her, praising her performance, asking how long she had been playing, and telling her how much they had enjoyed the music. Some shared personal stories of how the piece had touched them or reminded them of something special. She listened, grateful for the connection, feeling a warmth she had never expected. She thought back to the initial fear, the self-doubt, and the laughter, and she realized that all of it had been part of the journey. It had made the triumph even sweeter. Later that evening, as she walked home, the events of the day replayed in her mind. She thought about the nervous steps onto the stage, the trembling hands, the uncertain first notes, and the way the audience had slowly shifted from doubt to admiration. She smiled, feeling a sense of pride she had rarely experienced. She had faced her fears, shared her music, and discovered something important, that courage and passion could overcome fear, and that even a quiet, unnoticed person could make a powerful impact when they followed their heart. Back in her apartment, she sat at her piano once more, this time without fear or hesitation. She played freely, letting the music flow through her fingers, filling the room with a richness she had never felt before. She thought about the crowd, the cheers, the smiles, and the way music had allowed her to connect with others in a way words never could. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of belonging, a certainty that this was where she was meant to be. The piano was no longer just a private refuge. It was a bridge to the world, a way to share a piece of herself with anyone willing to listen. The night stretched on, and the young woman continued to play, each note a celebration of courage, passion, and self-belief. She thought about the journey ahead, the performances yet to come, and the music waiting to be discovered within her. She knew that there would be challenges, moments of doubt, and perhaps even laughter from those who didn't understand. But she also knew that she had found her voice, and nothing could take that away. The music flowed, and with it, a quiet triumph that no one could ever forget. After the talent show, the young woman's life felt different. She had discovered a courage within herself that she never knew existed. Yet, the memory of the whispers and laughter from the audience lingered in her mind. Even though many had cheered in the end, a small part of her feared judgment. She began to wonder if she was ready for what would come next. Would people expect her to perform again? Would they expect her to be perfect every time? The questions pressed on her mind, but she also felt a strong pull to keep playing, to explore this new side of herself that had finally stepped into the light. In the days that followed, she kept returning to the piano, practicing with more purpose than ever before. She no longer played only for herself, but with the thought of connecting to others, even if it was only one person at a time. Each evening, the small apartment was filled with melodies, some carefully rehearsed, others created spontaneously, as she let her emotions guide her hands. Music had become more than a hobby. It had become a lifeline, a way to express feelings she struggled to put into words. Her friends at work noticed a change in her. She walked with a little more confidence, her eyes brighter, her smile easier. Some noticed the faint glow in her cheeks when she talked about the talent show, though she often downplayed it. One coworker, curious and supportive, asked her if she would perform at a small community gathering. The thought made her heart race. The memory of laughter and doubt surfaced immediately, but then she remembered the joy she had felt as the crowd cheered for her. She hesitated only for a moment before agreeing, wanting to face her fears once more. When the day of the gathering arrived, she felt a familiar mix of excitement and anxiety. She arrived early, watching as people set up tables, chairs, and a small stage area. Children ran around, their laughter echoing, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was different from the talent show. There would be fewer people, more familiar faces, and she could play in her own way. But the nerves were still there, fluttering in her stomach and tightening her chest. As she prepared to play, she noticed a few people looking at her with curiosity, some smiling, some quietly skeptical. She felt her hands shake slightly as she approached the piano, her fingers brushing over the keys. The first note felt shaky, uncertain, and she almost stopped. But then she remembered the way she had felt in the town hall, the way the music had carried her through fear, and she pushed forward. She pressed the keys again, and this time the notes flowed more smoothly. The music filled the room, gentle at first, cautious, and then gradually building in strength. She let her emotions guide her, each chord reflecting a mix of joy, fear, hope, and determination. She noticed people turning to watch her more closely, their expressions softening as the melody wrapped around the room. She saw children pause in their play, captivated by the sound, and she felt a sense of connection that went beyond words. For the first time, she realized that the music could speak for her, carrying messages she could not articulate herself. A few moments into her performance, she heard a faint whisper of laughter from someone near the back. Her heart skipped a beat, and for an instant, she froze. The memory of past doubts came rushing back, but she reminded herself why she was here. This was not about pleasing everyone. This was about expressing herself, sharing something honest and beautiful. She let the music wash over her, drowning out the laughter, and continued to play with renewed focus. Each note became a statement of resilience, a small victory over the fear that had held her back for so long. As the performance continued, the atmosphere in the room changed. The initial skepticism faded, replaced by attentive eyes and gentle smiles. People began to nod their heads in time with the rhythm, some tapping their feet quietly. She could feel the energy shifting, the music reaching into the hearts of the audience, connecting them in a way she had never imagined possible. She realized that the laughter and doubt she had feared were fleeting. The power of genuine expression could overcome even the harshest judgment. After the final note, a quiet pause hung in the room, followed by warm, heartfelt applause. She lifted her hands from the keys, feeling both relief and a deep sense of accomplishment. People came forward, sharing compliments and words of encouragement. Some spoke of how the music had reminded them of childhood memories, or brought a sense of calm they had not felt in a long time. She listened, humbled by their reactions, and felt a quiet pride in herself. This was not about fame or recognition. It was about connecting, touching lives through something she loved. In the days that followed, she found herself reflecting on the experience constantly. The initial fear had been real, but so had the joy and fulfillment that came from overcoming it. She began to understand that fear and doubt were not enemies to be avoided but challenges to be faced. Each time she played, she gained confidence, learning to trust not only her skill but also her intuition, her ability to communicate through music. She realized that mistakes did not define her performance. The honesty and passion behind the notes were what mattered most. She started exploring new pieces, challenging herself with more complex arrangements, and experimenting with her own compositions. The piano became a place for exploration, for discovery, and for expression beyond words. She even began to consider performing for larger audiences again, not out of obligation but out of a genuine desire to share her music. The thought was both thrilling and daunting, but she no longer feared it in the same way. She knew that each performance was an opportunity to grow, to connect, and to embrace her true self. Her coworkers and friends noticed the change, too. She spoke more openly about her love for music, sharing stories of her experiences, and sometimes even playing for them in casual settings. People admired her courage and determination, often telling her how inspiring her journey was. She felt a sense of community forming around her music, a network of support and appreciation that fueled her confidence further. The fear of judgment gradually faded, replaced by a sense of purpose and fulfillment. One evening, as she sat alone at her piano, she thought about how far she had come. The timid girl who had once been afraid of laughter and ridicule was now a young woman who embraced the challenge of performing. She reflected on the moments of doubt, the nervousness, and the small victories that had led her to this point. Each experience had taught her something valuable, and she realized that the journey itself was as important as the destination. She began to dream bigger, imagining opportunities to perform in new places, to meet other musicians, and to continue growing as an artist. The memory of initial laughter and skepticism no longer haunted her. Instead, it served as a reminder of her resilience and determination. She knew that fear would always be present, but it no longer held power over her. Music had become her voice, her sanctuary, and her bridge to the world. In the quiet of her apartment, she played late into the night, experimenting with new melodies and improvisations. Each note carried a piece of her heart, a reflection of her journey, and a testament to the courage she had discovered within herself. She understood that the path ahead would have challenges, but she also knew that with each step, she would grow stronger, more confident, and more connected to the people who shared in her music. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a symbol of her perseverance, her creativity, and her ability to rise above fear and doubt. As dawn approached, she finally rested her hands on the keys, feeling a deep sense of peace. She had faced her fears, shared her music, and discovered the power of persistence, passion, and self-belief. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had taken the first steps towards something extraordinary. Music had changed her life, not by making her famous or perfect, but by giving her the courage to embrace who she truly was and the confidence to let the world hear her voice. The young woman's confidence was growing, but she still felt a mix of excitement and nervousness whenever she approached a piano in public. She had played for small gatherings, gaining comfort with familiar faces, but the thought of performing for a larger audience lingered in her mind. Each time she imagined stepping onto a stage with bright lights and a room full of strangers, her stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Yet, she also felt a pull, a strong desire to share her music with more people and to see the reactions of those who had never heard her play before. One morning, she received a letter in the mail from a community center she often visited. They were organizing a local arts festival and were inviting performers from around the town to participate. She hesitated as she held the letter, remembering the laughter and whispers from her first public performance. Her fingers brushed the edges of the paper as she considered whether to accept the invitation. The fear of judgment and failure was strong, but so was the memory of the joy and connection she had experienced when her music touched others. After a long moment of thought, she decided she would go for it. She would perform at the festival, not to prove anything to anyone, but to embrace her love for music and her own courage. In the days leading up to the festival, she devoted herself to practice. She experimented with new pieces, some classical, some original, blending melodies in ways that felt natural to her. Her apartment was filled with the sound of music from morning until night, each note a small step in building her confidence. She also practiced visualizing the performance, imagining herself walking onto the stage, placing her hands on the piano, and feeling the audience's energy. Sometimes, she stumbled over difficult passages, her frustration building, but she reminded herself that imperfection was part of growth, and each mistake was a lesson. The morning of the festival, the town was alive with activity. Stalls lined the streets, and people wandered from booth to booth, tasting local food, admiring art, and enjoying live performances. She arrived early, carrying sheet music and her small notebook of original compositions. Her hands felt clammy, and she took a few deep breaths to steady herself. The stage was set in a central area, surrounded by an open space where people could gather. The piano sat under a soft canopy, its polished surface reflecting the sunlight. As she stepped onto the stage, she noticed the size of the crowd. Families, teenagers, older adults, and even some familiar faces from previous performances were present. A few people whispered, curious about the young woman at the piano. Her heart raced, and for a brief moment, she considered turning away, retreating to the safety of her apartment. But then she looked down at the keys and reminded herself that she had come to play for herself, to share something honest and beautiful. She took her seat, let her fingers hover above the keys, and drew in a deep, calming breath. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, as she began to play. She could hear some whispers in the audience, but this time, they did not intimidate her. Instead, she focused on the music, letting it guide her hands. The melody grew more confident, each note blending smoothly into the next. She allowed herself to be present in the moment, feeling the vibration of the piano beneath her fingers and the warmth of the sunlight on her face. The audience began to listen more intently, their curiosity growing with each passing measure. As the music continued, she noticed a young child standing near the front, eyes wide with wonder. The child's expression reminded her of herself, of the moments when music had been her sanctuary. She let the melody reflect joy and innocence, the kind that could light up a room. She played with a fluidity and expression that surprised even her, each chord carrying emotion she had never thought possible to convey. The crowd began to lean in, some nodding in time with the rhythm, others simply absorbing the sound in silence. Midway through her performance, a gust of wind rustled the papers on the piano. She glanced down for a moment, her heart skipping a beat, but then she smiled and continued. The moment reminded her that challenges could arise unexpectedly, but she was capable of handling them. She improvised a few measures, weaving the wind into her melody, and felt a sense of liberation. The music became more than notes on a page. It was a living thing, responsive to the world around her. The audience sensed this, their initial skepticism fading into admiration and engagement. By the time she reached the middle of her set, she was fully immersed in the music. Her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, each note conveying a story, an emotion, a fragment of her own journey. She thought about the moments of doubt she had faced, the fear of ridicule, and the long hours of practice. Each note was a triumph, a testament to her determination and her willingness to embrace vulnerability. She could see faces in the crowd softened by emotion, some closing their eyes, some tapping their feet, all absorbed by the power of her music. Near the end of her performance, she played a piece she had composed herself. It was deeply personal, a reflection of her struggles, her joys, and her growing confidence. The notes flowed like a conversation, speaking directly to the hearts of those listening. She felt a strong connection with the audience, as if the music had bridged the gap between her and each person present. For the first time, she realized that her music could not only express her own emotions, but also evoke feelings in others, creating a shared experience of understanding and empathy. As she played the final notes, a hush fell over the audience, followed by a wave of applause that washed over her like warmth. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, their smiles genuine and full of appreciation. She lifted her hands from the keys, her chest heaving with emotion, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. In that moment, she understood that fear and doubt were natural, but courage and passion could transform them into something beautiful and meaningful. After stepping off the stage, several people approached her, sharing their thoughts and compliments. Some spoke of how the music had moved them, brought back memories, or inspired them to pursue their own passions. She listened humbly, feeling a mix of gratitude and humility. The recognition was not what mattered most. It was the connection, the way her music had touched others and created a moment of shared humanity. She realized that this was the true power of art, to connect, to inspire, and to heal. In the days following the festival, she continued to reflect on the experience. The initial nerves and fear of judgment had been transformed into a sense of confidence and purpose. She began to see her own growth, not only as a musician but as a person willing to take risks and embrace challenges. Each performance, whether for a small gathering or a larger audience, became an opportunity to learn, to express herself, and to connect with others on a deeper level. She understood that the journey was ongoing, filled with both triumphs and obstacles, but each step forward reinforced her belief in herself. She also noticed a change in how others perceived her. Friends, co-workers, and community members began to recognize her dedication, passion, and talent. Some encouraged her to perform more often, while others simply expressed admiration for her courage. She felt a sense of belonging and appreciation that had been missing before. The music had not only transformed her own life but had also created a ripple effect, inspiring others to acknowledge and pursue their own passions. As she returned to her daily routine, she carried the lessons of the festival with her. The piano in her apartment became a sanctuary once again, a place for exploration and reflection. She experimented with new compositions, blending styles and emotions, and continued to refine her technique. Each note she played was infused with the memory of the audience, the applause, and the shared experience of connection. She understood that music was a journey, not a destination, and that the value lay not only in performance but in the growth, expression, and courage it fostered. In quiet moments, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a shy, timid individual who feared judgment to a confident young woman willing to share her music with the world, she had learned the power of perseverance, vulnerability, and passion. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, that fear and doubt would occasionally return, but she also knew that she had the strength and determination to face them. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a bridge to the world, carrying her emotions, her story, and her courage to those willing to listen. As night fell, she played softly, letting the music fill her apartment and her mind with reflection and hope. She thought about the performances ahead, the people she might reach, and the endless possibilities that lay before her. Each note was a testament to her journey, a celebration of growth, and a reminder that courage, passion, and authenticity could overcome fear and skepticism. The music flowed freely, and with it, a sense of peace, purpose, and anticipation for the future. The young woman had performed at several small events now, each one helping her confidence grow, but she knew the biggest challenge was still ahead. A regional music showcase was coming to her town, bringing together performers from across the area. The idea of playing in front of a larger, more experienced audience made her both anxious and excited. She understood that many would be skilled, perhaps trained for years, and the fear of being compared to them loomed in her mind. But beneath the fear, she felt a spark of determination. She had faced nerves before, and each time she had grown stronger. She decided to accept the challenge, ready to pour her heart into every note. In the days leading up to the showcase, she practiced relentlessly. Her apartment was filled with the sound of scales, melodies, and improvised passages. She focused not only on technical skill but also on the emotion behind the music, learning to let her feelings guide her hands rather than relying solely on her training. Each day brought small victories, a chord played with more confidence, a passage that flowed effortlessly, a melody that captured the mood she wanted to convey. She also faced moments of frustration, when her fingers refused to cooperate or her mind wandered, but she learned to be patient with herself, understanding that mastery was a gradual process. The morning of the showcase, the town hall was alive with activity. Performers tuned their instruments, rehearsed quietly in corners, and checked stage arrangements. She arrived early, carrying her sheet music and her notebook of compositions. Her hands felt clammy, and a familiar flutter of anxiety settled in her chest. She watched other performers, some of them practiced and poised, others more nervous like herself. Despite the nerves, she felt a sense of belonging, realizing that each person there shared a common passion for music, a love that transcended skill or experience. As she waited backstage, she thought about her journey. She recalled the first time she had dared to play in front of an audience, the nervous tremble of her hands, and the laughter she had feared. She remembered the applause that had followed, the sense of connection, and the way it had transformed her confidence. She realized that each step she had taken, each small performance, had prepared her for this moment. She was not perfect, nor did she need to be. What mattered was the honesty of her expression and the courage to share it. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, her heart beating fast but steady. She sat at the grand piano, its polished surface gleaming under the bright lights. The audience was larger than she had anticipated, a sea of faces looking toward her with curiosity and expectation. She felt a flicker of fear, but she took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs and calm her mind. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself before beginning. The first notes were soft and tentative, a delicate introduction to her performance. She could feel the tension in the audience, the anticipation that often precedes a live performance. She focused on the music, letting it flow naturally from her fingers, guiding the melody and rhythm. Slowly, her confidence grew, and the notes became more fluid, more expressive. She played not to impress, but to communicate, to tell a story through sound, each chord a reflection of her experiences, her emotions, and her journey. As she continued, she noticed the audience beginning to lean in, their expressions softening. A few smiles appeared, some heads nodded gently in time with the music, and the whispers of skepticism began to fade. She felt a connection forming, a silent understanding passing between her and the listeners. For the first time, she realized that her music had the power to reach beyond words, to touch hearts and evoke emotions that were universal and deeply human. She allowed herself to become fully immersed, her body swaying subtly with the rhythm, her face reflecting the emotions she poured into the piece. Midway through her performance, she began to take risks, adding flourishes and improvisations she had never attempted before. Each daring note was a declaration of her courage, a demonstration of her willingness to embrace vulnerability and authenticity. She could sense the audience reacting, the energy shifting as they became absorbed in the unfolding music. The initial doubts and fears that had plagued her moments before melted away, replaced by a sense of exhilaration and purpose. She was no longer simply performing. She was expressing, sharing, and connecting in a way that felt both liberating and profound. A particularly challenging passage approached, one she had practiced countless times but still found intimidating. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a brief second, and then she played with precision and emotion, each note ringing clear and confident. The audience responded with audible gasps and quiet murmurs of admiration. She felt a rush of exhilaration, the culmination of her preparation, practice, and courage. She realized that fear had been a companion, not an enemy, pushing her to perform at her best and to discover depths of her talent she had not known existed. As the final section approached, she played a piece she had composed herself, a work that told the story of her journey from hesitation to confidence. The melody was rich, nuanced, and deeply personal, and she allowed herself to fully inhabit it. The audience was silent, captivated by the sincerity and beauty of the music. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by her technique and expression. She felt a profound sense of connection, a shared experience that transcended the physical space and touched something universal in each listener. When the last note resonated and faded, there was a brief, awe-filled silence. Then the room erupted into applause, cheers, and whistles of admiration. People rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically, some calling out words of encouragement and praise. She lifted her hands from the keys, her chest heaving with emotion, tears of joy and relief forming in her eyes. She had faced her greatest fear, embraced her vulnerability, and shared a piece of herself with the world. The audience's reaction was overwhelming, not because it validated her, but because it reflected the power of honest expression and connection. After stepping off the stage, several people approached her, offering compliments, sharing personal reflections on how the music had touched them, and encouraging her to continue performing. She listened, humbled and grateful, realizing that her journey had not only transformed her own confidence, but had also inspired and moved others. The experience reinforced her understanding that music was not about perfection or recognition, but about sharing, communicating, and connecting in ways that words often could not. In the days that followed, she reflected on the showcase and its impact. The performance had been challenging, exhilarating, and deeply rewarding. She recognized that each obstacle she had faced, the initial laughter, the doubts, the fear of failure, had been essential to her growth. She had learned to embrace vulnerability, to trust her instincts, and to express herself fully. The applause and recognition were affirming, but the true reward was the understanding that she had grown as a person and as a musician, finding confidence and purpose through her courage and dedication. She returned to her apartment with a renewed sense of determination. The piano became a place for exploration, creativity, and emotional expression. She experimented with new compositions, blending different styles, and allowing her feelings to guide the music naturally. Each practice session was an opportunity to grow, to refine her skills, and to continue discovering the depth of her abilities. She also began to consider sharing her music more widely, performing in new venues, and connecting with audiences beyond her town, inspired by the transformative experience of the showcase. Her friends, co-workers, and community members noticed a change in her demeanor. She walked with a sense of pride, her confidence evident in the way she interacted with others. People admired her courage and dedication, often seeking her out for advice or simply expressing their appreciation for the inspiration she provided. She felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond performance, recognizing the ripple effect her music could have in motivating and touching the lives of others. In quiet moments, she reflected on her journey, acknowledging the challenges and fears that had once seemed insurmountable. From a shy, uncertain individual afraid of ridicule, she had grown into a confident, expressive musician willing to embrace vulnerability and share her talents with the world. She understood that growth was ongoing and that fear and doubt might return, but she had learned to face them with courage and authenticity. The piano was no longer merely an instrument. It was a vessel for her expression, a bridge to the world, and a symbol of her resilience and passion. As evening fell, she sat at her piano, playing softly and allowing the music to flow naturally. Each note carried a reflection of her journey, a testament to the courage, perseverance, and dedication that had brought her to this point. She felt a deep sense of peace and purpose, knowing that her music had the power to connect, inspire, and transform. The performance had not only revealed her talent, but had also affirmed her belief in the importance of embracing vulnerability, following one's passion, and sharing one's gifts with the world. After the regional showcase, the young woman felt a sense of fulfillment that she had never experienced before. The applause, the cheers, and the encouraging words from strangers had left a lasting impression on her heart. She walked home slowly that evening, taking in the cool air and the quiet streets, reflecting on everything that had happened. The nervous, timid girl who had once feared laughter and ridicule had grown into someone who understood the power of courage and music. Each step she took felt lighter, more confident, and full of purpose. She realized that the journey was not just about playing the piano but about discovering herself and connecting with others in a meaningful way. The next few weeks were filled with invitations and opportunities she had never imagined. Community centers, local schools, and even small cafes asked her to perform. Each invitation brought a wave of nervousness, but she also felt excitement. She knew that every performance was a chance to share a part of herself and to touch someone's life through music. She carefully chose pieces for each performance, sometimes playing classical compositions she loved, other times experimenting with her own creations. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was her voice, her way of expressing emotions that words could not capture. One afternoon, she received an unexpected invitation to perform at a charity event in a neighboring town. She hesitated at first, wondering if she was ready for an audience she did not know. But the memory of the regional showcase reminded her that courage was about taking steps forward despite fear. She accepted, determined to give her best. In the days leading up to the event, she practiced diligently, refining each piece, ensuring that her fingers and heart were fully prepared to convey the music's emotion. She also reminded herself that perfection was not the goal. Connection and honesty were far more important. When the day arrived, she felt a familiar mix of excitement and anxiety. The venue was small but filled with people, some curious, some familiar, all ready to listen. She took her seat at the piano and allowed herself a brief moment to breathe and gather her thoughts. Then she began to play. The first notes were gentle, cautious, but gradually became stronger as she felt the rhythm flow naturally. She let the music guide her, her hands moving with fluidity, her heart open to the audience. Faces softened, eyes brightened, and a shared sense of engagement filled the room. She realized that the music was creating a bridge between herself and the listeners, a connection that transcended words. Midway through her performance, she introduced an original piece she had composed. It was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and the courage she had found along the way. She felt the emotions rise within her, the joy of accomplishment mingling with the memory of fear she had once known. The audience was silent, absorbed in every note, and she sensed their appreciation growing with each passing measure. Her music was no longer just sound. It was a story, an invitation to share in her experiences and emotions. She felt a deep fulfillment as she realized that her courage had inspired others, even in subtle ways. After the final note, the audience erupted into applause. People stood, clapped, and some even called out words of admiration. She lifted her hands from the keys, feeling the warmth of their response wash over her. Tears threatened to fall, not from fear or nervousness, but from the profound sense of connection and achievement she felt. She had faced her doubts, embraced her vulnerability, and discovered the transformative power of sharing her music. Each smile and word of encouragement reinforced the importance of perseverance, courage, and authenticity. The weeks that followed were a period of growth and exploration. She continued to perform at various events, each time learning more about herself and the impact of her music. She experimented with different styles, blending classical melodies with improvisation, exploring new harmonies, and allowing her emotions to guide the compositions. The piano became a canvas for her expression, a place where she could communicate freely and authentically. She also started to receive invitations from local media, with small interviews and features that celebrated her courage and talent. Each opportunity was humbling, yet it reminded her that her journey had meaning beyond her own experiences. At work, she noticed a change in how her colleagues perceived her. She walked with a quiet confidence, her posture more relaxed, and her interactions warmer and more engaging. Some coworkers expressed admiration for her dedication, asking her to play at small office gatherings or community events. She embraced these moments, finding joy in sharing her music and inspiring others to pursue their passions. Even in her daily routines, the music remained a constant companion, shaping her outlook and infusing her days with creativity and purpose. One evening, she received a letter from a music school in a nearby city, inviting her to participate in a special workshop for aspiring pianists. The idea of studying alongside other musicians and learning new techniques thrilled her, but it also brought a twinge of nervousness. She reflected on her journey, recalling the first time she had dared to play in front of an audience, the moments of fear, and the small triumphs that had built her confidence. She decided to seize the opportunity, knowing that growth required stepping beyond her comfort zone. She began preparing for the workshop with dedication, eager to expand her skills and connect with other musicians. The workshop was intense but inspiring. She learned new techniques, practiced challenging pieces, and received guidance from experienced instructors. The environment was supportive, yet it pushed her to reach higher and perform with precision and emotion. She discovered new aspects of her own abilities, understanding that her journey was ongoing and that there was always room to grow. She also connected with fellow participants, sharing experiences, encouragement, and insights. The sense of community reinforced her belief that music was not just a personal pursuit, but a shared human experience, capable of connecting people across backgrounds and experiences. Returning home, she carried the lessons and inspiration from the workshop into her daily practice. Her performances became richer, more expressive, and more confident. She also began mentoring a few local students who shared her love for music but struggled with confidence. Teaching allowed her to share not only techniques but also the lessons of courage, perseverance, and authenticity she had learned through her journey. She realized that helping others grow was deeply rewarding and added another layer of purpose to her musical path. Months passed, and she continued to perform, teach, and compose. Each experience reinforced her belief in the importance of courage, passion, and connection. She understood that fear and doubt might always be present, but they no longer controlled her actions. Instead, they became reminders of the growth she had achieved and the strength she had discovered within herself. The piano was no longer merely an instrument. It was a partner in her journey, a medium through which she could communicate, inspire, and connect with the world. One afternoon, she returned to the very town hall where she had first played publicly. Standing before the piano, she reflected on the journey that had begun with fear and laughter, uncertainty and hesitation. She remembered the small victories, the nervous steps onto the stage, the applause, and the connections she had made along the way. Sitting down at the piano, she allowed her fingers to glide over the keys, playing freely and without fear. The music carried the story of her journey, each note a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of embracing one's passion. As she played, she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Her music had become more than sound. It was a reflection of her life, her growth, and her connection to others. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that each performance, each new challenge, was an opportunity to continue learning, growing, and sharing. She had faced laughter, doubt, and fear, yet she had emerged stronger, confident, and connected. Her story was no longer just her own. It lived in the hearts of those who had listened, who had been moved, and who had been inspired by the courage and honesty she shared through her music. The young woman closed her eyes for a moment, letting the final notes linger in the air. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, for the music, for the audience, and for the courage that had carried her from fear to confidence. She understood that the piano had given her more than a voice. It had given her a way to live fully, to embrace challenges, and to touch lives in ways she had never imagined. With a gentle smile, she rose from the piano, ready to continue her journey, knowing that her music would always be a bridge to the world and a reminder that courage, passion, and authenticity could transform fear into triumph.